Acts chapter 12. God doesn't bless laziness. Just like God didn't make you get saved, he's not going to make you get close to him. Acts chapter 12 and verse 5. Acts chapter 12, verse 5. Peter, this is after James was killed with a sword. Peter, therefore, was kept in prison. But prayer was made without ceasing of the church unto God for him. And when Herod would have brought him forth, the same night Peter was sleeping between two soldiers, bound with two chains. And the keepers before the door kept the prison. You know, I heard, I don't know who it was on the radio this week, last week, was talking about Peter sleeping. And he says, you know why Peter was sleeping? Because Peter believed God. And what did Jesus say to him when they were eating the fish by the fire? Jesus said to him that somebody's going to carry you where you wouldn't wish. In other words, you're going to be killed upside down. And Peter was crucified upside down. So James was killed with a sword. And so Peter said, hey, they ain't going to kill me because I'm supposed to die hanging upside down. But anyway, that's just a thought. But that's what the guy said. It makes sense, actually. Peter, therefore, was kept in prison. And when Herod would have brought, the keeper, verse 7, sorry. And behold, the angel of the Lord came upon him, and a light shined in prison, and he smote Peter on the side, raised him up, saying, arise up quickly. And his chains fell off from his hands. And the angel said unto him, gird thyself, and bind on thy sandals. And so he did. And he said unto him, cast thy garment about thee, and follow me. And he went out and followed him, and wist not that it was true which was done by the angel, but thought that he saw a vision. When they were past the first and the second ward, they came into the iron gate which leadeth to the city, which opened to them of his own accord. And they went out and passed on through one street, and forthwith the angel departed from him. You see what happened, though? God, the angel wouldn't do for him what he could do for himself. He says, get up, put your shoes on, put your coat on, and start walking. He could have just picked him up and made him, like happened to Philip. After he left the Ethiopian eunuch, he was gone, and the Spirit carried him away. He could have done that, but he didn't. God won't do for you or me what you can do for yourself. You know, the children of Israel marched around Jericho. They did what they could do, and God made the walls fall down. God made the walls fall down. You can get your heart right. God's not going to make you get your heart right. God won't make you be spiritual. You have to work at it. God won't make you keep in contact with him. Now, he may cause things in your life or in my life where we want to get in contact with him, but he won't make you get in contact with him. You'll still be his son the whole time, but he won't make you have a relationship with him. I have a brother that's 12 years older than me that I hardly know. I don't hardly know him. The things that I do know about him aren't very good because he's a very arrogant person, and he's always been that way. But I don't know him very well. I know all of you way better than I know him. Well, it's not by my choice, it's by his choice. But still, he's my brother. He'll always be my brother. Well, it's the same way. If you're saved, God will always be your God, and he'll always be your son. But he's not going to make you have a relationship with him. Relationships take work. Relationships take communication. Relationships take both sides. God's reaching out to us, but we need to reach out to him. And you've heard 100 times about daily devotions. Well, you can hear it 101 times. Daily devotions are important. Self-examination every day is important. You need to remember that. I need to remember that. But God won't do for you what you can do for yourself. God won't do for you what you can do for yourself. The second thing is, and I'm still learning this one like I'm still learning the first one. By the way, I have not arrived. I'm not even close to arriving. I might be getting on the bus, but I'm not arriving. I haven't got there yet. We're getting there. Your flesh can't be trusted. Your flesh can't be trusted. Go to Galatians chapter 6. Galatians chapter 6, verses 7 and 8. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption, but he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. You can't trust your flesh. And you know what? You can't get away with doing wrong. I can't get away with doing wrong. And whatsoever you sow, you're going to reap. It happens every time. I don't know how many people I've seen think that they were the exception, thinking that, well, hey, I can play with fire and it's not going to burn me. Oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. Every time. Every time. And every time I sow to my flesh, that's what happens. That's what happens. Your flesh can't be trusted. You know, when I was young, when I was in my 20s and 30s, I thought, man, when I get to be 60, I won't even have to worry about that kind of stuff anymore. My flesh won't bother me a bit. Boy, was I wrong. Your flesh is going to bother you till the day you die. And sometimes the older I get, the more it bothers me. I don't know why that is. But part of it is we need to sow to the Spirit more. That's why the older I get, the more I find myself reading my Bible more. Because I know what a wretch I am, and I know how bad I need it. There's no exceptions. You know, you look in the book of Proverbs, let's see, I think chapter 5, 6, 8, 9, Solomon's warning about strange women. He's warning about all this stuff. He said, don't do this, don't do this. A strange woman will bring you to poverty and all this stuff. He goes on and on. But then as you read about Solomon's life, but Solomon loved many strange women. He didn't pay attention to his own advice. He thought that he could get away with feeding his flesh. Well, guess what? Toward the end of his life, he was worshiping idols and throwing his children in the fire and all that stuff. And you can't trust your flesh. And you know what? We can't put ourselves in a position where it's easy to sin. Don't do it. Don't do it, because you can't trust your flesh. You can't trust your flesh when you've got, with these stinking phones that we have. Don't trust them, because the devil wants to sneak up on you and throw stuff in your face that you don't want to see. So you've got to block things and be careful of things and all that. Don't trust your flesh. Don't put yourself in a position that's a bad place to be. There's some places where you just don't need to be and where I don't need to be, because the devil's there. And our flesh is there, and our flesh wants to take us there. The world, the flesh, and the devil. And sometimes people say, well, hey, I can handle it. You can't handle anything. I can't handle anything. And God will help us get through things in our lives, but don't trust your flesh. The next thing, the next little word of advice, don't live in the past. Don't live in the past. You know what? You can't change what happened yesterday. You can't change what happened the day before. You can't change what happened last year. Don't live in the past. Don't live in the past. Philippians chapter 3, go there. You can't change the past, but you know what? You can learn from it. You can learn from it. Philippians chapter 3 and verse 13. Philippians 3:13 says, brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. You can't change yesterday, but you can learn from it. And if you sinned yesterday, you can confess it, but you can't change yesterday. You can't change it. So don't dwell there. Don't say, if only I had, I can't believe I did that. Every day is a clean slate. Every day is a clean slate. Every day is a new beginning. That's what I like about it. Every day is a new beginning. You can't live in the past. I've had things happen in my past, and so have you, that I wish I could change. But I can't. So don't live there. God's promised to give us a new day. You know, you wake up in the morning and you have a new day, a new day. And it's important to do that. And, you know, you can look at yesterday and say, man, did I make a mess of things? Well, the just man rises 7 times and rises up again. That verse that Pastor quotes all the time. But you know what? It's true. It's true. Get up. Keep getting up. Keep getting up. You get knocked down, you get up again. You get up again. And move on. Move on and keep on going. Keep on going. Psalm 48:8 says, in God we boast all the day long. That gives you something to live for, the new day. Psalm 100. Psalm 100. Go to Psalm 100. I really believe that when we get up in a bad mood or we get up and we know we have a tough day, we should stay with God until we get a smile on our face. Psalm 100 says, make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before his presence with singing. Know ye that the Lord, he is God. It is he that hath made us, and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving, and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him, and bless his name. For the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and his truth endureth to all generations. You know, today is going to be a better day than yesterday. And I'm not a power of positive thinking guy, but when we have God, we should be happy. We should be happy and not dwell on the past. Not dwell on the past. And, but sometimes we let our past overtake us and we shouldn't. The next thing is learn how to forgive. Learn how to forgive. Ephesians 4:32 says, be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. Well, you might say, well, they don't deserve my forgiveness. Do you deserve God's forgiveness? Do I deserve God's forgiveness? Learn how to forgive people. You know, there's nothing better. There's no better feeling on the face of this earth. When I was a young man, when I got saved, when I figured out I was forgiven. You're forgiven. No matter all past, present, and future sins, you're forgiven. Well, then sometimes we have trouble forgiving other people. Why? You know what? That's too much baggage to carry around. An unforgiving spirit. Learn how to forgive. Learn how to forgive. And, you know, God has forgiven us. God has forgiven us. And, you know, that's a weight off your mind. It really is. When my second year in college, my brother paid for the whole year for me, my brother Paul. And, you know, time went on and we got married, and the day came he was up for a visit, and I said, you know what, I never talked about paying you back. I said, I got to start, I'm in a position where I can start paying you back. And he looked at me with a smile on his face, and he goes, that's forgiven. He says, I forgave that a long time ago. I forgave that a long time ago. And that was a great feeling. It was a weight off my back. But you know what? Even more, that was just monetarily forgiveness. But you know, when somebody does you wrong, forgive them. Forgive them. And just like God gives us a clean slate every day, we don't deserve God's forgiveness. But you know what? When you don't forgive, it leads to bitterness. It leads to bitterness. You know, if you think about something that happened 15 years ago and it's still eating you up and you haven't forgiven the person for it, then you should. It'll be good for you to forgive like God forgives. To forgive like God forgives. The next thing is I have this written in the front of my Bible. Never resist a generous impulse. Now, if you can afford the generous impulse, how's that? Nobody in this church, maybe Grant might remember this, but years ago, we had these And Pastor, by the way, I appreciate the way Pastor takes up an offering. He says, you pray about it. God lays it on your heart. I'm sure that's what he's going to say Sunday when we have the guest speaker. God lays it on your heart. You give. By the way, pray and ask God what he'd have you to give. Because he'll tell you. He will. I mean, he's not going to call you on the phone and say, look, you're big. But God will impress upon your heart. But part of it is in here. If you have a generous heart, it's not going to take much for you to be touched. It's not. And I'm impressed by how much money we give to people as a church. But we should keep doing that because, God is a generous God. God gives me so much more. He opens the windows of heaven and dumps blessings on me. So we should be the same way. But years ago, we had these guys coming in. They were missionaries. They were high-powered fundraising machine. And Pastor doesn't agree with that, and neither do I. But he's not made that way. But these guys come in and they would shame people into giving. That's totally wrong. When I was in college one time, I sacrificially gave for an offering. And then this guy gets up and said, we need to compete with this other dormitory and give more money. And did that make me mad? I said, wait a minute, that's the wrong reason to give. But anyway, so this guy got up there and we need money. We got fundraising. So this new Christian gave a brand new 4-wheel drive vehicle that he couldn't afford to give, and it wasn't even paid for because some preacher guy, like I said, Pastor has never done that. Come up and did some high pressure and made this guy feel guilty. Well, that's the wrong kind of a generous impulse. That's giving out of guilt. You need to give out of your heart. You need to give out of your heart. So, and it pays to give God what's his. Psalm 23:5 says, I'm young, now I am old. I think Psalm 23:5 doesn't say that because it's the 23rd Psalm. Well, let's go to Psalm 23:5. There's a reason I have this written in my notes, and maybe it's just a mistake, but we'll find out, huh? Psalm 23:5, because the 23rd Psalm does not say what I think that verse says. But in Psalms, it does say, I am young, now I am old, yet not have I seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. Psalm 23:5 says, well, you know what? Yeah, that's a good verse. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. And that's God preparing a table. Every time I read this verse, I could see the bullets flying over somebody's head and the rockets and everything else. And a guy sitting there eating a chicken sandwich, and some potato chips or maybe a steak dinner while the bullets are flying over. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. My cup runneth over. And the next verse says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Yeah, there was a reason I wrote that verse down. And in Malachi, it talks about giving and rebuking the devourer for your sake. But don't resist a generous impulse. There's been a lot of times, and I'm not saying this to pat myself on the back, but there's been some times in my life when God said, just give somebody something to put a smile on their face. We had a guy, like I said, please don't think I'm patting myself on the back for saying this, but you know what? Even with lost people sometimes, we had a guy that was taking his son every other day to Rochester for brain, and the guy ended up passing away. The guy had brain cancer. And so, to this day, I have an audience with this guy because God just impressed on my heart to give him $50. I walked up and I said, listen, here's some money for gas. I know you're taking your son every other day. I said, maybe this will help you out. He says, you're giving me $50? I said, listen, I'm just giving you $50 to be a help to you. And to this day, if this guy sees me, it's, hey, how you doing? You know what I mean? Because I listened to God. I listened to a generous impulse. And $50 did cover 2 days of gas for the guy probably. But it was the thought. It was the thought. So So do that. The next thing is don't waste a lot of time being mad. Don't waste a lot of time being mad. Ephesians 4:26 is a familiar verse, but go there. So I think it says, let not the sun go down upon your wrath. But don't let the sun go down upon your wrath. You know, one of the quotes I didn't read is from Phyllis Diller. And it says, don't go to bed mad, stay up and fight. But that's not the answer. That's not the answer. Don't waste a lot of time being mad. Being mad is a waste of time. And you know what? It leads to grudges and it leads to bitterness. Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 17. It says, he that is soon angry dealeth foolishly, and a man of wicked devices is hated. Proverbs 22 and verse 24 says, make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go. I mean, I can't stand up here and say I've never gotten angry. Now that would be a bold-faced lie. But don't waste a lot of time being mad. And when you get mad, get over it. Get over it. You know, my wife, I love her dearly. She's very hard to stay mad at because she doesn't fight. So she won't say nothing. And we have had very few bad arguments in our marriage. I can't say we never have, but I think I can remember one especially when I dove over a table and broke it. And that's a long story, but that was a kind of young and stupid one of those times. But anyway, being angry doesn't solve anything. And I know people that are just carry anger for days. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. Don't let the sun go down upon your wrath. There's a lot of truth to that. Now, if you have to stay up half the night settling it, stay up half the night settling it, not fighting, but stay up half the night settling it. Because you know what? Two things. As a Christian, your testimony is too important, but another thing, you know, life is too short. Life is too short. I have a sister. My youngest sister has got a bad attitude. And she was angry with my brother. And she didn't talk to him 2 years before he died because she was mad at him. Well, I don't know what she was thinking when we were standing by the casket, but I know what I was thinking because everything between me and him were right. And she's standing there, tears running down her face, and I'm thinking, you know, it's a little too late to cry now. And, you know, and I'm not making fun of her. It's sad. It's too bad. This is the girl that's been kicked out of Walmart for being angry and yelling at the cash register and beating on doors with her crutches. I mean, really, come on. Don't waste a lot of time being angry. We shouldn't be known as angry people. I know at work, in the course of a 12-hour day, there'd be times when we got a little bit heated with people. But you know what? As soon as it happened, I'd feel so bad. And I would apologize even if it wasn't my fault, just to clear the air, just because I didn't want anything between me and another person. The next thing is, don't take yourself too seriously. Learn how to laugh. Learn how to laugh. It won't kill you. It really won't. Go to Proverbs chapter 15, verse 13. It says, a merry heart maketh a cheerful countenance. By the sorrow of him the spirit is broken. The heart of him that hath understanding seeketh knowledge, but the mouth of fools feedeth on foolishness. All the days of the afflicted are evil, but he that is of a merry heart hath a continual feast. Hath a continual feast. And the next verse says, better is little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble therewith. But learn how to laugh. Proverbs 17 and verse 22 says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. Get a song in your heart. Get a song in your heart. Laugh. Laugh at yourself. Laugh at other people. There's a lot of funny people in this world. There really is. Look in the mirror. I'm serious. But learn how to laugh. And there's some people that I just can't. We've got somebody in the town. Every time I talk to them, I start laughing, and I got to stop it because it's not good. But they're funny, and they're funny looking, but laugh. You know what? I think Jesus laughed a lot. You ever see the animals in the animal kingdom? There's some funny animals. There really is. And I think God made them just so he could sit up in heaven and laugh. And God the Father saying to God the Son, you see that stupid giraffe over there? Oh, my word. Or that orangutan or one of those, You see that monkey? He's making a real monkey out of himself, isn't he? And I could picture, maybe I'm wrong, but you realize Jesus spent 3.5 years with the disciples. 3.5 years. It's not all recorded in the scripture. It couldn't be, because John says the books wouldn't contain them. The books couldn't contain your life if I wrote down everything you did from the moment you're born, minute by minute. Couldn't happen. But I could picture Jesus walking from town to town with the disciples, goofing off once in a while. Hey, Peter, look at this. John's going to get a rock side of his head, and he's not going to know where it came from. Watch this. That kind of thing. Like I said, maybe I'm wrong, but I think Jesus had a sense of humor. He really did. And, God so loved the world. You think he came down here, and the Bible says he was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. But I'm sure in their downtime, they goofed off once in a while. Played a little checkers or something like that, chess, Jesus knew how to play. He knows everything. The only thing is, it wouldn't be fair because he'd know the move before you made him and all that stuff. So, but anyway. And I've often thought about Jesus growing up with his brothers, what that must have been like. Of course, you'd hate him if you were the brother because everybody hates a perfect sibling that never does anything. Oh, he just thinks he's better than us. Well, he is. He is. He thinks he's God. He is. That kind of thing. So, okay. The next one. God won't stop you from being a bonehead. He won't. He won't stop you from being a bonehead. But he will give you grace to deal with the consequences, and he won't keep beating you over the head with it. Go to Numbers 14. God won't stop you from being a bonehead. You have a free will. And there's times I wish God had stopped me from being a bonehead, but it didn't happen. So, Numbers 14, they're not going into the land. And, verse 41, they decided after they got told they weren't going into the land because of their unbelief. Verse 41, Moses said, wherefore now do you transgress the commandment of the Lord, but it shall not prosper? Go not up, for the Lord is not among you. Verse 44, but they presumed to go up into the hilltop. Nevertheless, the ark of the covenant of the Lord and Moses departed not out of the camp. Then the Amalekites came down, and the Canaanites which dwelt in that hill, and smote them, and discomforted them, even unto Hormah. So chapter 14 is a disaster, because they're not going in because of unbelief. But look at the first 2 verses of chapter 15. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and saying to them, when ye come into the land of your inhabitants, which I shall give you, and will make an offering by fire, and a burnt offering, or a sacrifice, in performing a vow, or in a free will offering. And he's telling them everything that's going to happen when they go into the promised land. That didn't happen for 40 years. But because they blew it in chapter 14, but in chapter 15, God's not beating them over the head with it. He's telling them, when you go into the land, this is what's going to happen. So that's what I appreciate about God. And a lot of times, we already make our own punishment by our bonehead decisions. We've already made the punishment. So God won't stop you from being a bonehead. The next one, be sensitive to that still small voice. Be sensitive to that still small voice. 1 Thessalonians 5:19 says, quench not the spirit. Listen to God when he speaks to you. There's so many times when I haven't and wished I had of. Don't quench the Spirit, but be sensitive to that still small voice. When Elijah was in the cave, he didn't hear God in the thunder, right? He didn't hear God in the lightning, but he heard God in that still small voice. That still small voice is telling you to do right. That's not your flesh, and that's not the devil. So pay attention to it. Pay attention to it. And the next one is be content. Be content. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 11. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 11. Philippians chapter 4, verse 11 says, Now I have learned, not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. You know, when we're content, we're satisfied with what God has given us. Be content. You know, I'm married to the most content person on the face of the earth. My wife has never said to me, why can't we have this? Why can't we have that? If I told her we had to live in a doghouse, she'd measure it for curtains. She would. Be content. Because you know what? When you're content, you'll be happy. And when you're content, when you get things and you get some of the things you want, you're in the bonus round. Okay? You're in the bonus round. Because if you're satisfied where you are and the place where God puts you, and even with some of the possessions you have, if you're content with that, then you really be thankful when God gives you some of those other things in the bonus round. When God gives you some of those other things, you really be thankful. You'll be thankful if you're content to begin with. Be content. The next one is, I can be wrong. That's profound, right? But I can be wrong, and you can be wrong. And you know what? We need to learn from our mistakes. And sometimes, I'll never forget, and you know, Pastor and I have talked about this. When I was in my 20s, I had some pretty hard-nosed attitudes about things. But you know, I get older. I said, you know what? You don't have to be such a hard-nose about some of this. I'm not talking about doctrine. I'm not talking about standards even. But I'm talking about relationships with people sometimes. And God's given me a lot more grace with people. And but you know what? I can be wrong. And we have to get to the point where we can be wrong, and we can be taught, and we can be teachable. Because, you know, wisdom didn't die with us. It certainly didn't die with me. And we need to do that. The next thing is the sun always comes up in the morning. The sun always comes up in the morning. And that kind of goes along with don't dwell in the past. But you know, there's been days in my life when I didn't think the sun was going to come up the next day. But you know what? It did. It did. The sun always comes up the next day. It always does. God always has, like I said, God always has a new day. God always has a new beginning. And the sun always comes up the next day. It always does. It always does. And all things do work together for good. All things do work together for good. You might not see the good for 40 years, but all things do work together for good. Because it's a promise of God, for one thing. And I've seen tons of things in my life where bad things turned out for good. And it doesn't necessarily mean all bad things turn out for good. Sometimes good things turn out for good, if that makes any sense. But it says all things work together for good. All things work together for good. And we need to believe God. I want to end with a couple quotes that I have written in the front of my Bible. The first one is by Jim Elliot. It says, "Forgive me for being so ordinary while claiming to know so extraordinary a God. You think about that. You know what? I could say that. I'm so ordinary after claiming to serve an extraordinary God. The next one's by George Mueller. And this is profound. The beginning of anxiety is the end of faith, and the beginning of true faith is the end of anxiety. You think about that. Well, there's more. The first great and primary business to which I ought to attend every day is to have my soul happy in the Lord. To have my soul happy in the Lord. And you know what? We need to pray until our soul is happy. I've done a lot of things where I had no peace. When I went in a situation, I didn't have peace, and it just was a disaster. But I found that if I pray and say, God, listen, you've got to give me peace in this situation. You've got to make me happy. You've got to make me happy. And like I said, I think I mentioned this a while ago when I was preaching, but we had a very difficult town board meeting a couple meetings ago, and I went to the next one, and I said, God, you've got to give me peace, and I'm going to pray until you give me peace. Well, guess what? He gave me peace. He gave me peace. And, it says, I ought to attend every day to have my soul happy in the Lord. And you know what? Most of the time, we're in too big of a hurry. We're in too big of a hurry to get our soul happy. Why should your soul be happy? Well, your sins are forgiven. You're on your way to heaven. 100 years from now, you're going to be in the most wonderful place you can ever imagine, looking at the most wonderful person that that's ever been around, God, Jesus Christ, and that should make our soul happy. But God has given us so many different things. Our standing before God is perfectly righteous. That should make our soul happy. All right, get out your prayer lists.